video shows that you can set up and use aact quickly to produce graphics that reveal interesting information. We'll do this in 3 steps. First, we will download aact to a local machine, in this case a Mac. We'll then use SQL to create a custom view in the aact database that presents only studies likely applicable to FDAA regulations. And then we'll use Tableau to create some interesting visualizations using this view. So let's get started. Step 1 is to download aact. We're on the aact website here, and we'll go to the download static copy, and assume that Postgres is installed on your computer just for the sake of time. We'll take the most recent version and double click on it to get it downloading. It takes a few minutes for the file to download. There it is. It shows that it's complete, so we'll move on to the next step. I'm on a Mac, so I'm going to press the command spacebar and enter terminal so that I can open a terminal session where we'll proceed. The next thing we want to do is create the database, so I'll type create db aact because I've been using this database a number of times that it's already there, so I get this expected message. The file right here is in my download directory, so I'm just going to go to downloads. There's the file, and I just want to unzip that file. And it unpacks several files containing documentation. The one that we're interested in that has all the goods in it is this postgresdata.dump file. So once that's unpacked, we move down here and we will do this command, which will take all that data and populate the database with it. The load usually completes within about 10 minutes. Once done, a copy of all study information contained in clinicaltrials.gov is now on your local machine to query as you like. We'll log into the database to verify that it does contain the expected number of studies. To do that, to enter the database, we just enter psql aact. And we'll just run this select count from studies to verify the number of rows in the studies table, which is as we would expect. We've completed step 1 of the demo, and we'll move on to step 2, which is to create a custom view in our new database that will present only studies that are likely applicable to FDAA regulations. And to be honest, this simply involves writing a SQL command that creates the view and then grants users rights to select from it. And since this demo is to illustrate how views in general can be used to help investigate this data set, I'm not going to go into detail about the criteria we use for this particular view, but we'll copy and paste the sample SQL in, and then move on to step 3 where we're going to use this view. So here is the SQL. This is the part that creates the view, and then we granted rights to it to aact. And then just to test it, we count the number of FDAA studies, which is 56, almost 57,000. We have our own database with a custom view containing FDAA applicable studies. So it's time to use Tableau to make sense of the data. We'll launch Tableau, and then we'll select PostgreSQL on the left because that's the type of database that we have. The server is localhost. The database name is aact, so is the username and the password. On the left is a list of the tables and views in this database. So we're just going to use 2, the FDAA studies view that we just created, and the calculated values table, which contains a field called were studies reported, which we'll be using. So we take FDAA studies, we'll drag it up there, and the other one we're interested in is calculated values, and they automatically relate. We'll go to a sheet and we'll start creating a graph. Now we're interested in finding them by the year that they were completed, so we're going to drag completion date to the columns. It will show that it goes out into the future, so we only want those that have a type of actual completion date as opposed to anticipated. So we're going to add a filter for just actual completion dates. And at this point, we can grab the number of records and drag it to the rows column, and you can see the number of studies that were completed in each of these years. You can drill down into one of these. If you right-click on it and look at View Data, you can look at the underlying data, the studies that account for the dot at that point on the graph. We're only interested in studies that were completed at least a year ago, so we're going to add another filter for the maximum completion date. We only want it from the maximum to be from 2016, from a year ago. So that looks interesting. We're getting more and more studies completed with each passing year. But now let's compare it to its calculated value of were results reported. Drag this to the colors. And you'll see that the number of studies reported is actually not nearly as high as we would expect. We can get a percentage of total. Like first we'll do this to a bar chart, and we can add a table calculation to get a percent of total by picking percent of total of the were results reported. And here it shows for each year the percentage. There's only about 1 in 4 for 2015 were results reported. So we might wonder if there are any specific traits that would make a study more or less likely to have its results reported, such as the phase. So I'm going to add a filter for phase so that I can play around with it and see if there are any obvious patterns. To do this, like our other filters, I'm going to grab the attribute in that view, drag it to filters, and this time I'm going to select all of them and say OK, and then what I'm going to do is add a show filter so it displays it over here. Then I can move it over, I can select different ones. So if I only show a graph with just phase 4 studies, it shows that the number of studies are more likely to be have results reported for phase 4 studies. Let's try early phase 1. Say, yeah, so far less likely. And this is basically just to illustrate that you can play around and look at how things compare with these filters. They're very useful.